The Majority Leader.
Unanimous consent, call the quorum be terminated.
Without objection. On the previous question, in the previous order, the question is on the nomination. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The nomination is confirmed under the previous order. The issue is on the Durkin nomination. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The nomination is confirmed. Under the previous order, the motions to reconsider are made and laid upon the table. The President will be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate will resume legislative session.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that we now proceed to approve morning minutes. Senators allowed to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to calendar number 246, S-1792.
The clerk will report.
Calendar number 246, S-1792, a bill to clarify the authority of the United States Marshals Service and so forth.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the bill be read a third time passed. Motion to reconsider be laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate. Any statements related to this matter be placed in the record at their appropriate place as if read.
Without objection.
I now ask we proceed to calendar number 233, S-1793.
The clerk will report.
Calendar 233, S-1793, a bill to amend Title 28 United States Code and so forth and for other purposes.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I now ask the White House substitute amendment, which is at the desk, be agreed to. The bill is amended be read a third time passed. Motion to reconsider be considered made and laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate. Any statements related to this matter be placed in the record at their appropriate place as if read.
Without objection.
Note the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
The Majority Leader.
Unanimous consent the call be terminated.
Without objection.
I now ask unanimous consent that we proceed to H.R. 6223.
The clerk will report.
H.R. 6223, an act to amend Section 1059E of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2006 to clarify that a period of employment abroad by the Chief of Mission or United States Forces as a translator and so forth and for other purposes.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I now ask unanimous consent that the bill be read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be laid on the table, and any statements relating to this matter appear in the record at their appropriate place.
Without objection.
I now ask consent we proceed to S. Res. 3687.
The clerk will report.
S3687, a bill to amend the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, and so forth and for other purposes.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I now ask that the bill be read a third time passed. Motion to reconsider be considered made and laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate. Any related statements be printed in the appropriate place in the record as if read.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to calendar number 236, H.R. 2076.
The clerk will report.
Calendar number 236, H.R. 2076, an act to amend Title 28 United States Code to clarify the statutory authority, and so forth and for other purposes.
I now ask...
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
Sorry, Madam President. I further ask the committee reported amendments be considered, that the White House amendment, which is at the desk, be agreed to, the substitute amendment as amended be agreed to, the bill as amended be read a third time passed, a motion to reconsider be considered made and laid on the table with no intervening action or debate. Any statements related to this matter be placed in the record at the appropriate place as if read.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to S.Res. 619.
The clerk will report.
S.Res. 619, to elect Patrick J. Leahy, a senator from the state of Vermont, to be President pro tempore of the United States Senate.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to and the motion to reconsider be laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate. Without objection. I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to consideration of S.J. Res. 620.
The clerk will report.
S.Res. 620.
S.Res. 620, to authorize Harry Reid, a senator from the state of Nevada, to administer the oath of office of the President of the Senate pro tempore to Patrick J. Leahy, a senator from the state of Vermont.
I ask unanimous,
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the motion we consider be laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to S.Res. 621.
The clerk will report.
S.Res. 621, condemning the horrific attacks in Newton, Connecticut, and expressing support and prayers for all those impacted by that tragedy.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the motion reconsider be laid on the table with no intervening action or debate, and any statements related to this matter be printed in the record at the appropriate place as if read.
Without objection.
Madam President, we've understandably, Senator Kaka wants to make a statement regarding our friend Senator Inouye who passed away, but Senator McCain has been waiting here for hours, and so I'm asking consent that Senator McCain be recognized to do a statement. When he completes that statement, Senator Kaka be recognized.
Without objection.
Madam President.
The senator from Arizona.
I thank the Majority Leader. Today, the Senate lost an America, and especially his beloved citizens of Hawaii, lost a unique, brave, wonderful legislator today. A man who brought to this institution the most unique credentials that I would argue probably of anyone who has ever served in this pretty diverse body. Dan Inouye was born of Japanese parents who came to Hawaii, as many Japanese did in that period of time in the turn of the century, to work in the pineapple fields and in the agriculture at that time that was a fundamental of the economy of the state of Hawaii. Their conditions were not good. They worked hard, but they raised their families with pride, with dignity and honor, and were proud to call themselves Americans. And Dan Inouye was as proud as any. As we know, one of the most shameful chapters of American history took place during World War II. An incredible act of injustice, the United States of America decided to intern Japanese Americans who lived in California. They were put into internment camps because they happened to be Japanese Americans. Not because they had done anything wrong, not that they didn't love America, but because they happened to be Japanese Americans. And by the way, some of those internment camps were in my home state of Arizona. Conditions weren't terrible, but they weren't good. People were incarcerated because they happened to be ethnic Japanese. In Hawaii, it was a group of young Japanese Americans who decided that they wanted to serve their country and they wanted to serve in uniform. So one of the most well-known and famous and the most highly decorated unit of the entire war, of World War II, was a battalion in which Dan Inouye served. They were in many of the most gruesome and difficult bloodlettings of the entire conflict. As the American forces fought their way up through Italy against a very well-trained, very well-equipped, professional German opposition, Dan Inouye was a proud member of this battalion. And in fierce combat, Dan Inouye was gravely wounded on the battlefield. He was brought home. He was, as we all know, lost his arm in that one of the wounds that he sustained. And interestingly and coincidentally, he went to a veterans hospital in Chicago where a person in the same ward with also grievous wounds was another American Army, actually second lieutenant, who had also been wounded seriously in Italy, one Bob Dole, Second Lieutenant Bob Dole of Kansas. And there began a friendship that lasted and is true to this day. Both gravely wounded, both dedicated more than ever to serve their country, both served with distinction. And the friendship, the bonds of friendship that were forged in that hospital between Bob Dole and Dan Inouye were unique and enduring. So Dan Inouye returned back to his beloved Hawaii, and the story goes, and I don't know if it's true or not, and the story goes that Dan Inouye went down to join the Veterans Organization. And when he applied for membership, he was told that the only members that they took in that organization were Caucasian. Dan Inouye decided that he wanted to continue to serve his country and the state of Hawaii. And he was the first United States Senator from the state of Hawaii and served longer than any senator in this institution. He was loved by all of us. I didn't always agree with Dan. Occasionally we had differences about how we use appropriations bills, but no one ever accused Dan Inouye of partisanship or unfairness. He loved Native Americans and he loved his Hawaiians. One of the more rewarding periods of my time here in the Senate was being on the Indian Affairs Committee under his chairmanship. Very important pieces of legislation came out of that committee, and it was a great honor for me to have the privilege to serve with Dan Inouye. He loved the Native Americans. He knew that Native Americans had been wronged in our history. He knew that solemn treaties must be honored by our government, even if those treaties sometimes meant that there would be significant expenditure of America's tax dollar. Have no doubt that our treatment of Native Americans and the treatment of Native Hawaiians is not the most glorious chapters in American history. And we look back at what happened to the proud Native Americans as their Native Hawaiians as their collision collided with the civilization that came from the United States of America and around the world. Dan Inouye fought for the things he believed in and the principles that he held dear, and he held nothing more dear than the glory of being able to serve people who need to be served. Dan Inouye will be missed. There will not be another like him. There will not be another United States Senator who literally was deprived of his rights. There will not be another United States Senator that served at the length and the dedication that Dan Inouye served this Senate and his beloved Hawaii. So we'll all miss Dan Inouye, but we should all, I hope from time to time, with the bitter partisanship that exists from here sometimes in the United States Senate, that maybe we could use Dan Inouye's record of bipartisanship, of friendship, of a willingness to reach across the aisle and work with the other side, which characterized Dan Inouye's record here in the United States Senate. For some reason, when I heard and thought about Dan's passing today, I was reminded of another person who died and is buried on the island of Samoa. And his poem is inscribed on his gravestone as an epitaph. I think it applies to our dear and beloved friend who passed today. It was by Robert Louis Stevenson. And I quote, "Under the wide and starry sky, dig the grave and let me die. Glad did I live and gladly die. And I laid me down with a will. This be the verse you grave for me. Here he lies where he longed to be. Home is a sailor, home from the sea, and the hunter, home from the hill." I see my dear and beloved friend, the other senator from Hawaii, Danny Akaka, on the floor. I thank you, Danny, and God bless.
Madam President.
The senator from Hawaii.
Madam President, it is very difficult for me to rise today with a heavy heart to bid aloha, aloha to my good friend, colleague, and brother, Dan Inouye. It is hard for me to believe that the terrible news I received is true. Senator Inouye was a true patriot, an American hero in every sense. And he is, at this time in Hawaii, the greatest leader. He served his country as a soldier, receiving the highest honor our nation can bestow. When we think of how he began to serve his nation, it was difficult to believe the difficulty they had in Hawaii as Japanese Americans to be a part of our nation's military. They were denied. They were considered aliens. of this country. But he was one of those that wanted to serve his country, and they went to the highest level to receive that dignity, and eventually they were given the honor to serve our country. And as we now know, they became the greatest unit in military history, with the most decorations of any unit, and also with the highest levels of decoration of the Medal of Honor. He served as a leader, the third longest serving member of the U.S. Senate in our nation's history. He served as a defender of the people of this country, championing historic charges for civil rights, including the equal rights of women, Asian Americans, African Americans, and Native Hawaiians. It is an incredible understatement to call him an institution. But this chamber will never be the same without him. And I remember in childhood in Hawaii, that Hawaii is a diversified place. Where I lived in Powell Valley, there were many Japanese families that lived around us. And there were many nights that I spent sleeping in the homes of our Japanese families, ate their food, slept on the tatami or the floor, and really was brought up with the Japanese families. So when the war broke out, I couldn't understand what was happening, because there were families that were removed from the community, and of course, at that time, the Japanese American boys weren't allowed to be in the military. But they pursued it because they wanted to serve this country as well. And this is why, in my time in Congress, I did focus on trying to help the Japanese Americans in this country and the Asians in this country as well, and to help them achieve what they really earned. And I remember seeking the Medal of Honor for the unit and for those who fought in World War II. And I provided the Pentagon with 100 names from these units. And was really surprised that there were finally 21 of them that were selected for the Medal of Honor, and Senator Inouye was one of them. But that showed that they were willing to give their lives for this country, and they did. And since then, he has continued to serve his country. We all use the GI Bill to be educated in Hawaii. We went to the University of Hawaii, and graduated there and went on to further degrees and came back as, in a sense, those who could help the communities and became leaders in the communities. And in the case of Dan Inouye, they were the ones that turned the tide in Hawaii politically, and since 1954, and by 1959, we became a state, and Senator Inouye ran for office, was our first member of the House, and after one term, moved to the Senate because Senator Long decided to retire. And as a result, Senator Matsunaga was elected to the House and served the House and also the Senate as well. And he also was a member of the 100th Infantry during World War II. But the Japanese Americans really served our country well, and Dan Inouye is one of those great leaders in the history of this country. Through my career in Congress, I have been proud to be on Dan's team. We worked together on everything from appropriations to Native Hawaiian rights, to veterans, and to defense. All of us in Hawaii looked up to him, and we are so sad to see him go. Dan Inouye leaves behind him a list of accomplishments unlikely to ever be paralleled. His lifelong dedication and hard work in the name of his beloved country, the United States of America, influenced every part of his life and set him apart, even in the Senate. He was a fierce advocate as a senior member on several committees, and the way he conducted himself commanded respect from all whom he worked with. His legacy is not only the loving family that he leaves behind. It can be seen in every mile of every road in Hawaii, in every nature preserve, in every facility that makes Hawaii a safer place. He fulfilled his dream of creating a better Hawaii. He gave us access to the resources and facilities of the mainland states I would say took for granted. Tomorrow will be the first day since Hawaii became a state in 1959 that Dan Inouye will not be representing us in Congress. Every child born in Hawaii will learn of Dan Inouye, a man who changed the islands forever. I join all of the people of Hawaii tonight in praying for his wife, Irene, his son, Ken, and daughter-in-law, Jessica, his stepdaughter, Jennifer, and his granddaughter, Maggie, that really tickled his life. Whenever I had a chance to chat with him, we talked about Maggie. And they brought him so much joy in this life and carries his legacy forward. I'm going to miss Dan. So will all of us here in the Senate and this great country will also. Because he represented a true American. And for us in Hawaii, he represented a true Hawaiian in Hawaii and has served Hawaii and this country well. Dan and I have worked so well together all these years. And when I was in a House and in the Appropriations Committee there, we worked very well between the House and the Senate. And many of the renovations that have come about in Hawaii was because of Dan. And he really helped to shape Hawaii and this great country. But he brought here on earth a kind of life that people of our country and this world can follow and be great citizens of the world. Dan, my dear friend and colleague, you will be missed in Washington as much as you will be missed in Hawaii. Rest in peace. God bless you and your spirit. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
The senator from North Carolina.
I ask unanimous consent the Help Committee be discharged from further consideration of S-3472 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report.
S-3472, a bill to amend the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 1974 to provide improvements to such act.
I further ask...
Without objection, the committee is discharged, and the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I further ask that the Landrieu substitute amendment, which is at the desk, be agreed to, the bill as amended be read a third time and passed, the motion to reconsider be made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, and that any statements relating to the measure be printed at the appropriate place in the record as if read.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it recesses until 10 a.m. on Tuesday, December 18th, 2012, that following the prayer and pledge, the Journal of Proceedings be approved to date, and the, excuse me, and the time for the two leaders be reserved for their use later in the day. That following any leader remarks, the Senate be in a period of morning business for 1 hour, with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with the time equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees, with the majority controlling the first half and the Republicans controlling the final half. And that following morning business, the Senate resume consideration of H.R. 1, the legislative vehicle for the emergency supplemental appropriations bill. Finally, that the Senate recess from 12:30 p.m. until 2:15 p.m. to allow for the weekly caucus meetings.
Without objection.
If there is no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it recess under the previous order.
The Senate stands in recess until 10 a.m. tomorrow.
So the Senate's gavelled out, but earlier today, members began debate on a bill that provides funding for Hurricane Sandy victims. The legislation grants funding for the National Flood Insurance Program and for FEMA's Disaster Relief Fund. Debate continues this week. Also today, the Chamber approved 2 judicial nominations for district courts in California and Illinois. And off the floor, negotiations continue in efforts to avoid the fiscal cliff. If no agreement can be reached between Congress and the White House, those scheduled tax increases and spending cuts begin to take place in January. Follow the Senate live here on C-SPAN 2 when members gavel back in on Tuesday. Also today, the U.S. Senate lost a member. Daniel Inouye of Hawaii died earlier today. He was elected to the U.S. House in 1959, his state's first full member. 3 years later, in 1962, he was elected to the U.S. Senate, where he served for close to 50 years. Senator Inouye was the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. He was 88.